The sensors blinked just once. I dismissed it. Interstellar dust often muddled up readings in the depths of space. But before I could relax, a flicker on the edge of my peripheral vision turned my cabin's reflective metal walls into a startling tableau. I wasn't alone. Towering figures, identical in every aspect from their reflective blue skin to their piercing amber eyes, stood silently in my quarters as if materialized from the ether itself. "Are you lost?" I asked, forcing my voice steady, my hand inching towards the emergency alarm. One of them tilted its head, regarding me with an intensity that stirred a primal shiver. "We could ask the same of you, human." Their voices echoed in perfect unison. "For you are in our space now." Captain Elijah Marks settled into the command chair of the Orpheus, his beloved vessel, and took a long breath. The usual hum of the engine thrummed through the floor, a comforting rhythm that calmed his mind. Space was silent and empty, just how he liked it. This uncharted region of the outer reaches was known for its rare mineral deposits and the occasional rogue comet, nothing to worry about. But then a brief glimmer appeared on the Orpheus's radar. He squinted, brushing it off as cosmic interference. He'd been tracking debris, mineral clusters, even microasteroids for weeks now, and there was always some blip in the readings. Elijah was about to dismiss it when the glimmer turned into a solid signal and an alarm beeped on his console. Elijah frowned. "Computer, identify the source of the interference." The onboard AI responded in its flat, automated tone. "Unknown origin. Presence detected inside the perimeter of the captain's quarters." Elijah froze. No one but him had clearance to be in his quarters. And nothing in the database explained how anything, or anyone, could breach the Orpheus's tightly sealed hull undetected. His heart hammered, and instinctively, his hand went to the emergency button under his console. The air in his quarters shifted, the scent changing to something earthy and strangely metallic, like a thunderstorm about to break. He held his breath and slowly turned around, locking eyes with two figures that seemed to defy the very light around them. Towering figures, identical in every way, from their shimmering blue skin to their sharp amber eyes, stood silently, staring at him as if they'd been observing him for hours. Elijah felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He'd encountered strange life forms before, even aggressive alien species, but nothing like these twins. They were eerily still, and their eyes glowed in a way that pierced the shadows of his quarters. "Are you lost?" he forced out, barely recognizing his own voice, which felt thin in the silence of the room. Both figures tilted their heads in perfect unison, moving like mirror reflections. "Lost?" One of them repeated, almost as if they were testing the word, a faint smirk tugging at the edge of its mouth. The other finished the sentence, their voices weaving together in an unsettling harmony. "We might ask the same of you, human, for you are in our space now." Elijah's hand inched toward the emergency alert, but the first figure's eyes flicked to his wrist. "That won't be necessary, Captain Elijah Marks," it said smoothly, stopping him cold. The mention of his name stopped his movement as surely as if he'd hit a wall. Only the Galactic Alliance and the Interstellar Mining Guild had access to his identity and ship records. Elijah had taken this mission specifically for its solitude. Yet these creatures not only had bypassed his security systems but also knew him. "Who are you?" Elijah's voice hardened. "And how did you get on my ship?" "We are Rith," said the one on the left, his voice low, a thrumming note that almost echoed. The one on the right added, "And I am Lith. We come from a place you would struggle to imagine, a realm far beyond these physical stars." Elijah's mind raced, but he couldn't come up with anything coherent. He'd heard of beings capable of telepathy or long-distance projection, but none who could manifest directly into another vessel. This was beyond advanced. It was dangerous. He looked at them, their postures relaxed, seemingly unconcerned by his alarm. "I don't care if you're from another dimension," he managed, summoning a tone he hoped was commanding. "You're trespassing on a private vessel, in Galactic Alliance space." The twins' expressions softened, and they exchanged a glance that felt all too knowing, as if they shared a private joke. "Alliance space?" Rith murmured, eyes narrowing with a faint glimmer of amusement. Lith's lips curled in a smile that was both condescending and curious. "We believe you are mistaken. For this sector, and your entire vessel, falls within our domain, a place hidden from the rest of the universe." Elijah's eyes narrowed, pulse pounding in his ears. What do you mean, your domain? I mapped this sector myself. There are no claims, no active systems, and definitely no native species registered. Lith raised a hand, and suddenly the entire room changed. What had been a modest metal-walled cabin on a solitary mining vessel now seemed to stretch out into a vast crystalline cavern, shimmering with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. His ship, his cabin, everything he knew was gone. Elijah stumbled, trying to steady himself, his mind spinning. "Welcome," Rith said, his voice echoing off invisible walls, "to the Convergence." "The Convergence?" Elijah whispered, his heart racing as he gazed around, trying to process what he was seeing. "Yes," Lith confirmed, his gaze fierce, "where boundaries of reality thin and ancient power still sleeps. And you, Elijah Marks, are standing in its heart." He was about to ask how this was possible, how a mining vessel and its lone captain could somehow stumble into what seemed like a realm of immense, incomprehensible power. But he didn't get the chance. Rith and Lith stepped closer, their movements as fluid as mercury. "Captain," Lith continued, his tone almost gentle, as though he were speaking to a child, "we are here because you have awakened something. Your presence, an anomaly we cannot ignore, brought us here. And the consequences of your intrusion are significant." Significant? Elijah's voice was barely more than a croak as he fought to keep his focus on the twins. Rith's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed. "Significant enough that either you help us prevent a catastrophe or we remove you from this place before you can cause it." The threat hung heavy in the air, colder than the vacuum of space itself. Elijah could feel the intensity of their words, a promise that left no room for doubt. "Catastrophe?" he managed, eyes darting between the twins. "What exactly did I awaken?" The twins exchanged another look, their eyes flashing, as if they were deciding how much to reveal. Finally, Lith spoke, his voice a whisper filled with tension. "There are technologies here, powers you cannot begin to understand, powers capable of shaping worlds or ending them." Elijah tried to steady himself, but his mind was reeling. Was it possible? Could his ship's sensors, his very presence, have triggered something so dangerous? Yet he still didn't understand why these beings needed him. There was no denying their power. Why go to such lengths to enlist his help? But why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rith's gaze softened, almost as if he understood Elijah's confusion. "Because the Convergence chose you. Your arrival here is not a coincidence. It is an alignment of probabilities so rare that even we, who have watched for centuries, could not foresee it. You are tied to this place, Elijah," Lith said, his voice holding a weight of certainty that both comforted and terrified him. "And without your help, what lies dormant here will wake. And when it does, all who enter this realm, human or otherwise, will face consequences far beyond anything the Galactic Alliance has ever encountered." Elijah clenched his fists, feeling the weight of their words sink into his chest. A strange mixture of fear and responsibility stirred within him, each battling for dominance. He was a simple miner, not a hero, and certainly not a protector of galaxies. But the intensity in the twins' eyes told him that they wouldn't take no for an answer. A silence fell over them, stretching as long and vast as the stars beyond. Finally, Elijah took a deep, steadying breath. "All right," he said, the words seeming to seal his fate. "Tell me what I have to do." The twins shared a look, their expressions unreadable, but their eyes bright with a determination that matched his own. "You must pass through the gateway," Rith said, gesturing to an archway at the edge of the crystalline cavern that hadn't been there moments before. "Beyond it lies a place of ancient knowledge. There you will learn what you have awakened and how to contain it." As he stepped forward, the realization settled into his bones. Whatever he had stumbled upon was far greater than anything he'd imagined. And there was no going back. With one last glance at Rith and Lith, he walked toward the gateway, ready to face whatever fate awaited him on the other side. Elijah's heart pounded as he stepped toward the shimmering archway, his pulse echoing in his ears. He couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that crossing into the unknown would mark the point of no return. But Rith and Lith's intense gazes urged him forward, their expressions a mix of expectation and veiled urgency. The crystalline surface of the gateway pulsed with an iridescent light, colors shifting like waves in an ocean. He hesitated, reaching out a hand tentatively, half expecting the gateway to resist his touch. But the surface felt warm, humming with a low vibration that almost seemed to sync with his heartbeat. "Don't be afraid, Captain," Rith's voice whispered from behind. "You are more prepared for this than you know." A flicker of doubt crossed Elijah's mind. He wasn't a trained warrior or a scientist with knowledge of ancient powerful artifacts. He was just a miner, accustomed to the dull monotony of harvesting minerals and avoiding interstellar pirates. But standing here, under the steady, unflinching gaze of these alien twins, he felt like someone or something had orchestrated his life to lead him to this very moment. With a final glance over his shoulder, Elijah stepped through the gateway. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a vertigo that gripped him as if he were plummeting through layers of gravity. Blinding light enveloped him, and for a moment he was weightless, suspended in a vast nothingness that echoed with strange, haunting whispers. Images and memories flickered around him, moments from his life flashing in rapid succession, disorienting him as he tumbled forward. Then, with a sudden jolt, the light dissipated, and he found himself standing in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Dark, jagged structures, like obsidian monoliths, rose from the floor, casting long, menacing shadows across the room. The air was thick with an electric charge, crackling faintly, and the temperature was just above freezing. Elijah blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim, eerie glow emitted by the monoliths. Each one was etched with intricate, flowing symbols that looked both alien and somehow familiar, as if they held secrets that teased the edges of his memory. "Welcome, Captain," a voice echoed through the chamber, causing Elijah to turn sharply. It was Rith, though he looked different here. His form flickered slightly, as if he were a hologram struggling to maintain cohesion. Lith was beside him, her face a mirror of solemn focus. "This," Rith gestured around, "is the Archive of Souls. It is the heart of the Convergence and holds the essence of countless civilizations, all united under a common purpose, to guard what lies dormant." Elijah's throat went dry. What exactly lies dormant here?" Lith's eyes flickered with something close to pity. "A being, an entity of ancient power that exists beyond time and space, capable of erasing entire star systems if unleashed. It is older than anything you or we could comprehend, and recently it began to stir." He felt a chill crawl up his spine, cold sweat dotting his forehead. "And you think I have something to do with it?" "Yes," Rith said, stepping closer, his gaze intense. "You are connected to it in ways that transcend the logic of your world. The Convergence sensed your presence the moment you entered this sector." Lith pointed to one of the monoliths, her finger tracing the symbols etched into the stone. "Each of these symbols represents a soul, a being who has over the ages joined the Convergence to protect the entity's prison. They willingly became part of this place, tethering themselves to ensure the entity remains sealed." Elijah's mind spun. This chamber wasn't just a storage of knowledge. It was a crypt, a silent testament to beings who had sacrificed themselves to protect something they considered too dangerous to let loose. A daunting weight settled over him. "So what do you expect me to do?" he asked, keeping his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Rith exchanged a look with Lith. "You must become the next guardian," Rith said softly, "one who will stand between the entity and any who seek to release it." Elijah stepped back, shaking his head. "No, I can't. I didn't sign up for this. I was sent here to mine resources, to survive and earn my way back. I'm no protector, no hero." Lith's eyes softened, a flicker of empathy breaking through her stern exterior. "We understand your fear, Elijah. None of the souls before you sought this role either, but the Convergence chose you for a reason. We too do not know why, only that it has never chosen wrongly." The words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on him. He'd spent his life avoiding situations like this, finding ways to fly under the radar, avoid conflict, and survive. But this wasn't just a decision about his survival. It was about the survival of an untold number of lives across the universe. Elijah took a deep, shaky breath, staring into the endless dark of the Archive of Souls. "If I agree, what happens next?" Rith's expression grew solemn. "You will undergo a trial, one that will test your mind, your courage, and your spirit. Only those who succeed are permitted to become guardians." Lith stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. "But be warned, Captain. If you fail, the consequences will be irreversible. The entity may stir further, sensing weakness, seeking to break free. A spark of resolve ignited within him, a flame of defiance against the unknown. He didn't want this, but he was here now. If there was even a chance he could make a difference, he couldn't turn away. "All right," Elijah said, straightening his shoulders. "I'll do it. I'll take the trial." The twins nodded, their expressions a mix of approval and somber acknowledgement. "Then prepare yourself, Captain," Rith said, gesturing toward a smaller archway that had materialized at the edge of the chamber. "For beyond that threshold lies the beginning of your journey. Trust in yourself, for you carry the fate of worlds within you." With a final nod, Elijah walked toward the archway, each step weighted with both fear and determination. As he passed through the arch, the world around him shifted once more, plunging him into a realm of darkness and echoes, a place where the true trial would begin. The darkness engulfed Elijah as he crossed the threshold, a silent void where light and sound felt swallowed by an unseen force. He moved cautiously, extending his hands forward, feeling his way through the emptiness. Every step echoed back to him, reverberating through the hollow space, each sound amplifying the sense of isolation and foreboding that hung heavily in the air. And then, suddenly, he felt something shift around him. A faint glow appeared, like the soft burn of an ember, and Elijah could make out rough-hewn stone walls forming around him. The passageway was narrow, forcing him to press against the cold, damp walls. It felt ancient, untouched for centuries. He pushed forward inch by inch and then stopped short as a voice echoed through the silence. "Captain Elijah Marks." The voice was neither Rith's nor Lith's, and it seemed to vibrate with something more primal, a presence he could feel down to his bones. Elijah's grip on his blaster tightened, though he knew instinctively it would be useless here. "Who are you?" he called, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. The voice chuckled, low and menacing. "I am the one you seek to imprison, the entity that slumbers, yet hears everything that stirs within its domain." Elijah's blood ran cold. He had entered the lair of the entity they sought to guard against. His first trial, it seemed, would involve facing this powerful force directly. He steeled himself, refusing to let fear consume him. "Why? Why am I here?" he demanded, hoping his voice sounded stronger than he felt. A faint, mocking laugh reverberated through the walls. "You've been chosen, yet you are weak, human, frail, vulnerable. Tell me, Captain, what makes you think you can hold back something as ancient and vast as me?" The walls around him seemed to shift, forming faces, figures twisted in agony and pleading. Elijah's heart hammered in his chest as he recognized the faces, not random, but memories from his own life. Lost friends, comrades from mining expeditions gone wrong, people he'd failed to save or protect. Their eyes stared, accusing, reproachful. Guilt clawed at him, a familiar sensation he'd buried over the years. Here, though, it resurfaced with a ferocity he couldn't ignore. The entity was prying open his weaknesses, probing his insecurities. The weight of those memories pressed down on him, suffocating. "Elijah," the voice hissed, "do you really believe you're worthy of this trial? Your failures speak for themselves." He closed his eyes, trying to shut out the images, but they pressed into his mind like jagged shards. "Maybe I'm not worthy," he murmured, feeling his resolve waver. "But someone has to try, and I'm the one who's here. If I turn back now, if I give in, then I prove you right. And that's the one thing I refuse to do." A fierce determination surged within him, steadying his resolve. The faces faded, the weight lifting from his shoulders. The oppressive darkness seemed to lose some of its grip, and Elijah took a breath, feeling a strange calm settle over him. "Well spoken, human," the voice admitted, its tone almost admiring. "Perhaps there is more to you than frailty and weakness, but this is only the beginning." Without warning, the walls opened up, revealing a cavernous chamber stretching far into the distance. At its center, an enormous stone tablet floated, glowing faintly with symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. Elijah approached it cautiously, noting the strange alien script etched across its surface. "What is this?" he muttered aloud, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the tablet. "The knowledge of those who came before you," the entity replied. "Guardians from distant stars, long dead yet still bound here. Their wisdom, their strength, yours to command, should you prove yourself." Elijah reached out, hesitating before his hand met the cold, hard surface of the tablet. The moment his fingers touched the stone, visions exploded in his mind. Memories, knowledge, skills, experiences from beings he couldn't name yet understood intuitively. He felt his own consciousness merge with theirs, absorbing fragments of languages, tactics, histories. Guardians who had once stood where he stood now whispered within him, lending their strength. But it was overwhelming. Each guardian had faced horrors, fought battles beyond his comprehension, and the sheer weight of it all threatened to tear his mind apart. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus, to hold on. "Enough," he growled, pulling his hand back, gasping for air as the visions receded. His head throbbed, a reminder of the immense power and knowledge he'd barely tapped into. The entity's voice returned, softer but still tinged with a dark amusement. "Impressive, Captain. You survived the first trial, but the knowledge you seek comes at a price." A crack split the ground before him, and Elijah stumbled back as an ominous red glow seeped through, casting the chamber in an eerie light. Shapes began to emerge, figures twisted and monstrous, their forms a nightmarish blend of alien anatomy and spectral presence. These were not memories, they were creations of the entity, designed to test his newfound strength. "Face them, Captain," the entity intoned, "or turn back and be forgotten." The creatures circled him, their eyes gleaming with malice. Elijah clenched his fists, willing the remnants of the Guardian's knowledge to guide him. His blaster hummed to life, the weapon feeling lighter, more precise in his hands. He fired, the energy bolt striking the nearest creature and scattering its form into vapor. But the others advanced, unfazed. Drawing on what he'd learned, he moved with precision, sidestepping attacks, striking with accuracy he hadn't possessed before. Each blow landed with surprising force, each maneuver instinctive, as if the Guardians themselves moved within him. The battle was brutal, but Elijah held his ground, pushing himself beyond his limits, refusing to yield. Finally, as the last creature dissipated, he dropped to his knees, chest heaving, exhaustion settling over him. Silence filled the chamber once more. "You have passed." The entity's voice echoed, softer now, almost respectful. "But remember, Captain, the power you wield is only borrowed. It is yours as long as you remain worthy." Elijah rose slowly, feeling a strange new confidence, tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. His first trial was over, but the weight of his task had only grown heavier. "Then I'll prove myself," he said aloud, his voice steady. "No matter what you throw at me, I'll face it." A pathway opened before him, leading to the next part of his journey, and without hesitation, Elijah stepped forward, deeper into the unknown. Elijah stepped cautiously into the next chamber, his senses heightened from the previous trial. The air was charged with an electric energy, and he could feel a presence watching him, as if the walls themselves were alive with anticipation. Flickering lights danced along the edges of the stone structure, casting shadows that twisted and morphed. As he moved deeper into the room, he noticed a strange altar in the center. It was adorned with symbols similar to those on the tablet, but they glowed brighter, pulsating like a heartbeat. Approaching the altar, Elijah felt an urge to touch it, an instinctual pull that he couldn't ignore. Just as his fingers brushed the surface, a blinding light enveloped him. He staggered back, shielding his eyes, and when he opened them again, he found himself not in the dark chamber, but in a lush, vibrant forest. Sunlight streamed through the thick canopy, illuminating the colorful flora around him. "Welcome, Elijah," a melodic voice chimed, breaking the tranquility of the scene. Turning, he saw a figure emerging from behind a massive tree. It was a woman, tall and ethereal, her skin shimmering with shades of green and blue, her hair flowing like strands of ivy. She regarded him with eyes that sparkled like stars, a serene smile gracing her lips. "I am Lyra, a guardian of the light," she said, her voice soothing. "You have proven your strength, but now you must learn the value of wisdom and compassion. Your next trial will not be fought with weapons, but with understanding." Elijah frowned, unsure how understanding could possibly be a trial. "What do you mean?" Lyra gestured to the forest. "This place is a sanctuary for those who have lost their way. You will encounter beings in turmoil, their hearts heavy with pain. You must help them find peace." Before he could respond, the forest shifted, and he found himself standing before a group of creatures. Small, timid beings with luminous eyes. They huddled together, trembling as shadows loomed over them. Elijah approached cautiously. "What's wrong?" One of the creatures, a small, furry being named Ori, spoke up. "We're being hunted. A dark force has taken over our home, and we fear for our lives." Elijah felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let these innocent beings suffer. "I'll help you. Show me where to go." The creatures led him through the forest, guiding him to a clearing where a dark, swirling mass pulsed ominously. Elijah could sense the malevolence radiating from it, and he steeled himself for a confrontation. As he stepped forward, the shadows twisted and coalesced into a monstrous form, a nightmarish creature with eyes like burning coals and claws that dripped with darkness. It roared, sending a wave of fear crashing over him. But then he remembered Lyra's words. This wasn't just a battle, it was about understanding. Drawing on the knowledge he'd gained, he took a deep breath and spoke to the creature. "Why do you hunt these beings? What do you seek?" To his surprise, the creature hesitated, its ferocity wavering. "I am driven by hunger, by the darkness that consumes me. I cannot control it." Elijah's heart ached for the creature, recognizing a shared struggle. "You don't have to give in to it. Let me help you find your way back to the light." With each word, the creature's form began to shift, its eyes softening. It faltered, and in that moment, Elijah reached out, connecting with the creature's essence. A surge of warmth flooded through him, and he felt the darkness within the creature start to dissipate. The shadows retreated, and the creature shrank before him, transforming into a smaller, more gentle form. The air filled with light, and the forest erupted in a chorus of joyful sounds. Elijah turned to the creatures he had saved, their eyes wide with awe. "You did it!" Ari exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "You brought peace." But Elijah shook his head. "It wasn't just me. We all have the power to help each other. That's what makes us strong." Lyra appeared beside him, a proud smile on her face. "You have passed the second trial, Elijah. Remember, compassion is as powerful as any weapon." With those words, the forest shimmered and faded, and Elijah found himself back in the dark chamber. The altar pulsed with renewed energy, and he knew he was one step closer to the final trial. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted again, the air thick with tension. Elijah felt the weight of what lay ahead. The entity's voice returned, echoing ominously. "You have faced trials of strength and compassion, but the final challenge will test your very essence. Prepare yourself, for you will confront your greatest fear." The ground trembled, and the shadows twisted as a new vision enveloped him. He stood in a desolate wasteland, ruins of a once thriving city stretching as far as the eye could see. Smoke curled into the sky, darkening the sun, and an overwhelming sense of loss washed over him. In the distance, he saw a figure, a child standing alone amidst the devastation. His heart raced as he recognized the child. It was a younger version of himself, lost and afraid. "Mom!" "Dad!" the child cried, his voice a haunting echo. "No!" Elijah shouted, rushing toward the boy. "I'm here. I'll protect you." But as he approached, the scene shifted violently. The ground cracked beneath his feet, and the child was swallowed by darkness. Elijah fell to his knees, panic surging within him. "You failed them," the entity's voice sneered, echoing in the chaos. "You couldn't save them then, and you can't save them now." Elijah fought against the despair that threatened to engulf him. "I won't give in," he screamed, his voice rising above the chaos. "I have to face this." The darkness around him began to swirl, pulling him deeper into his memories, the failed missions, the lives lost, the guilt that haunted him. But instead of letting it consume him, Elijah embraced the pain. He stood up, eyes blazing with determination. "I made mistakes, yes, but I learned from them. I've fought for those I love, and I will not let fear dictate my actions." The shadows recoiled, and the child's voice echoed again, clearer this time. "Don't leave me." Elijah reached out, his hand touching the darkness. "I'm here. I'll never leave you again." The ground shook violently as the darkness exploded outward, and Elijah was propelled back into the chamber. He landed hard, gasping for breath, feeling the weight of his fears lifting. The entity's voice rang out, no longer mocking. "You have confronted your past, faced your fears. You are worthy." As the darkness receded, a bright light filled the chamber, illuminating the path ahead. Elijah stood, the weight of his trials behind him, and took a step forward into the light. The tunnel twisted and turned, the air growing colder as Elijah ventured deeper. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering secrets of ancient power and untold horrors. The ground beneath him felt unstable, as if he were walking on the edge of a precipice. Suddenly, the path widened into an expansive cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the far end, a flickering light caught his eye, pulsing like a heartbeat. Curious, he moved toward it, the shadows retreating as he approached. As he drew closer, he saw the source of the light, a swirling vortex, vibrant and chaotic, filled with colors he couldn't name. But as he reached the edge, a chill ran through him. The air crackled with energy, and a sense of dread filled his heart. "Welcome to the abyss," a voice hissed from within the vortex, the tone mocking and sinister. "This is where the lost are consumed, where light meets darkness." Elijah steadied himself, raising his blaster instinctively. "What are you?" he demanded, scanning the swirling chaos. "I am the echo of despair, a reflection of your innermost fears and doubts. I thrive on weakness, and you will be my next feast." A wave of shadowy tendrils lashed out from the vortex, lunging toward him. Elijah fired his blaster, but the energy bolts dissipated as they struck the shadows. Panic surged through him, and he stumbled back, barely dodging the tendrils that swept toward him. "Face me, human!" the echo taunted, its voice echoing in the cavern. "Your strength will crumble before the weight of your doubt." Elijah could feel the tendrils closing in, darkness creeping into his mind. He clenched his fists, recalling the warmth of the Guardian's power flowing through him. "You won't take me," he shouted, drawing on the fire and water within him. He released a surge of energy, a brilliant blast of light that surged forward, colliding with the tendrils. The shadows recoiled, hissing in rage, and Elijah pressed forward, pushing the light deeper into the vortex. "Your light may be strong, but it cannot extinguish the darkness within," the echo roared, its voice trembling with fury. But Elijah didn't relent. He summoned the Guardian's powers, mixing fire and water into a swirling torrent of energy. The brilliance erupted, illuminating the cavern and banishing the shadows that threatened to consume him. With a final push, he thrust the energy into the heart of the vortex, and a blinding explosion erupted. The cavern shook, the darkness unraveling as the echo screamed in fury, its form collapsing into nothingness. As the light faded, Elijah stood panting, adrenaline coursing through him. The cavern was transformed, now aglow with ethereal light, the weight of despair lifted. He had conquered the echo of despair, but he knew the trials were far from over. 3 trials down, the entity's voice echoed through the chamber, calm yet ominous. "But the most challenging awaits. Prepare yourself, Captain." Elijah nodded, determination etched on his face. He would face whatever came next, knowing he was not alone.